Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Sandcap Guide podcast. I'd like to welcome our good friend Rogan White here. Rogan, and we go back a few years. Rogan is actually the real estate sales and manager out on Useppa Island. He's also happens to be the broker out there, and he's also the membership director. So this is a man wearing many hats. We met through a very busy man. We met through real estate photography. In our other lives as photographers, we've been doing real estate photography out in Useppa for many years for Rogan, and we've got to know each other rather well over the years. You might know Rogan's father, or be aware at the very least of his talents as a writer, and Randy Wayne White. I can never say it.
Dad has trouble saying his own name.
He has his
We're not the only ones.
And actually, let's start with that. I know that's because it was a story that you told me that actually sticks out. Tell me about your dad and finishing the books, and because you got brothers, and tell us about growing up and how your dad writing books, and he used to get you to finish them, didn't he? Tell us that story.
No, it was a blast growing up. Dad, he's a fantastic author. He's always been a skilled wordsmith. And I found that I found his, or at least my mom's high school yearbook. They were high school sweethearts, and I read what my dad wrote. And they were complete sentences, and they made perfect sense.
For a boy in high school.
It flowed, and so that was eye-opening for me to see that, so this talent is something that existed.
Right. Yeah.
You don't just create it. But
is he from Ohio? Where did he go to?
Originally from Ohio,
That's what I
yes.
thought.
And moved down here in the mid-'60s.
Gotcha. So he went to high school here or high school in Ohio?
No, high school in Ohio.
Right.
And when he turned 18, he went out on his own and ended up living around Fort Myers Beach, actually near the shrimp boats there.
Yeah.
And he started working for the Fort Myers News Press, and among other things. But when we were growing up, he was a travel writer for Outside Magazine, Reader's Digest, Men's Health, Men's Journal, you name it. And he would be sent on assignments, and specifically for Outside Magazine, his shtick was being a middle-aged man, middle-aged American, traveling essentially to the armpit of the earth. So he would go on assignment in really bad places.
Really?
And just kind of fumble through them, and there would usually be a focus, and it was really some of the best writing of his that I've ever read.
Really?
And I think that it really exists, his monthly articles for Outside, but he would find an excuse, or if the assignment was safe enough, and if he could get my brother and I out of school, he would take us. So we spent a month in Australia. We went to South Africa. We went all over the place with him.
Wow.
And all along, he tried to involve us in whatever he was up to. And he's busy. I mean, he was running fishing charters.
Right, because that was his other life, too, was as a charter fisherman.
In Tarpon Bay Marina before it became a federal preserve. It was a functioning marina with liveaboards, fishing guides, fuel, and all the rest.
And your dad was one of those.
That's where he guided out of. So he was fishing over 300 days a year.
Wow.
While trying to get books published, all while being a travel writer.
Right, and a family man.
Yes, while having two young boys and a wife. So he was busy, so he tried to bring us along as often as possible and involve us. And
that's awesome.
And at one point, and I don't remember which book it was, my brother and I mentioned to him, well, could we at least write the last word? That way we could say that we finished a book. And that's how it started. So ever since then, whenever he's wrapping up a book, he would bring us into his office and tell us what to write, and we would finish the books. And then as my brother and I grew up and kind of moved off between school and work, the effort to go about it changed. He would either text us or email us, and we would email it back. But the tradition continued.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah. Right. So it was a childhood that at the time I didn't really recognize was
probably
unique, but when you spend your vacations loading up little John boats to take to the Everglades and camp on remote islands, or you travel to Cuba or do certain things like that, it was normal to us at the time. But now,
looking back,
I have two young boys, and I'm nervous to take them to the store sometimes.
Wow.
So just in case you've been living under a rock, give us a little synopsis about Randy Wayne White.
Mm-hmm. He does the same thing.
Yeah, he does the same thing. So it's how many books? 26, is it? That was it.
I think you're about right, and I'm
counting.
And counting, and they range from fiction and nonfiction. He's most widely recognized because of the Doc Ford series of books, and now many people recognize Doc Ford more as a restaurant than as books, but fewer people are eating these days, and they're eating just as much or more. So his nonfiction work. He has a series of essays out through it's 4 or 6 books, I forget. But the nonfiction essays are reminiscent of his days traveling as a travel writer, and he's done some very interesting things. He knows a lot of very interesting people, and these very interesting people have been involved in our lives from the start. And again, it was one of those situations where everything's normal, but when you're 8 years old and you go to Cabbage Key and John Kennedy Jr. and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. pull up on a Scarab cigarette boat to have lunch with you, that was normal to us.
Right. Wow.
Today we look back and it's just like, what in the world was Dad doing rubbing shoulders with those people?
Right.
Yeah, seriously. That's incredible. Doc Ford is actually one of the characters in one of the books.
Right. And what I like about your dad's books is they're fictional books, but then he interweaves the real locations and things and about this area. So
they're set in the Sanibel Captiva Islands,
right.
Although different names.
Dinkins
Bay is in fact Tarpon Bay,
right.
But they always go somewhere else, and it's typically themed around locations where he's traveled. Central South America. He spent a lot of time in Central and South America in the 80s and early 90s. And so he brings his books back to those places.
Right. Wow, fantastic.
Do you know a Captain Mike Fury?
Fury?
Yeah.
It sounds familiar, but I can't place it.
Okay. My best friend in college, his father was a fishing guide around the same time as your dad.
Mm-hmm.
He also claims that he helped give your dad the idea of Doc Ford.
Well, he very well could have.
I think they were editors on the newspaper or something together.
Really?
Yeah.
I'll have to ask him about it. I had the name does sound familiar. I just couldn't.
He was a captain, a fishing guide on Sanibel since before the bridge was here.
Really?
So he was here forever. Yeah.
Well, that network, the fishing guide network, whether it's today or
still the same,
10, 20 years ago, it's always been a tight knit group.
Really.
And especially back then, I mean, all those guys were struggling for business. It was before, of course, Sanibel really lit off. So when Dad got into that business, it was not in an effort to become a fishing guide. In fact, he wanted to be a historical charter boat captain, shelling, sightseeing, dolphin tours, stuff that a guy from Ohio could do.
Right.
The industry,
or couldn't do.
The industry wasn't that kind, though. So when he got connected with Tarpon Bay Marina, they were aware that he had a boat and he had a captain's license, and he was willing and able to take shelling and sightseeing charters. But the owner of the marina called him up with his first charter and said, "I have 4 guys from Ohio and they want to catch snook." And Dad said, okay. He had never caught a snook in his entire life. And so he did it. I mean, at that time, I don't know, I think my brother was born, but maybe I hadn't. But he was a struggling artist. I mean, he needed to make money. I mean, we didn't grow up as a wealthy family. We grew up as a hardworking family trying to make it. Yeah. So he accepted that charter, and he said that they caught 1 fish. It was a catfish, and it stung him through his thumbnail. and that was Dad's introduction into fishing charters.
300
That's so funny because the first time I ever went fishing here when we moved here, and I think it must have been 1999 or whatever, we got a small crappy boat that we went out fishing, and I asked a fishing guide. I came back in. I was working at Sanibel Printing Graphics, and they had a printer as a part-time fishing guide. And I came back in all excited because I'd caught this catfish, and he said, "Nick, that's awesome." And he said, "You know when you know how you know if you're in the wrong place for catching fish?" And I said, "No, how's that?" He said, "If you're catching catfish."
That's
so, yeah. But it's a fascinating story, and please, if anybody knows of anybody on the islands that could share in any of these stories, or would think that they might be a good guest, or know somebody that might be a good guest on the podcast, please leave some comments in the description below. And if you like stories like this, make sure you like and subscribe so that you get upcoming content. But anyway, that's an awesome story about your dad. But let's get back to you, because you really have a story of your own, starting off in the FSU and then into marine construction. And tell us how you ended up out on Useppa.
Yeah, it was a bit of a journey. I did go to Florida State. I attended.
As did Max.
I wouldn't say I studied at Florida State. I went. Right. And I really had no direction when I went, other than that's what society said you did after high school. So I did that. But in 2004, Hurricane Charlie came and tossed a lot of things around here. And I was back home around that time, and my best friend growing up had been working for our friend's family business, and that was marine construction. So my buddy was telling me about driving tugboats, doing dive work, running excavators, all sorts of fun stuff. And I just thought, why in the world would I go back to Tallahassee when this opportunity's here? And the opportunity was a poorly paying hourly job of hammering nails and toting
sweating
really
cuts
heavy
and bruises.
Lumber, but
hammering your finger.
But the benefits were all the fun things that we got to do, like running heavy equipment and getting on scuba tanks and diving in really dangerous conditions, and that was fun. So I worked in that industry for a couple years and did a lot of things that I never would have expected I would be able to do as a 23, 24-year-old.
Yeah.
I pushed a 100-foot long barge full of fireworks to Marco Island for the 4th of July fireworks show.
Oh my goodness.
On a tugboat that I had never run before because it had just been delivered from New Orleans.
Oh, wow.
And that was sketchy at best.
Yeah.
But it all went smooth, and I got to watch a fireworks show from the wheelhouse of a tugboat only about 30 yards away from the barge.
That's cool.
It was remarkable. And after that, I actually, for a couple of years, I was a fishing guide. And that was a target of mine growing up because Dad was a fishing guide, and I just saw how much fun that could be. And get a boat, take people fishing. It'll be great.
The reality?
It's not great.
It's not great.
No. It's not great. It's hard work. There's a lot of pressure. It's dependent on the climate, both economic and weather related. And it's a job. And if you don't do it, you don't make money. So that novelty wore off after a couple years. And I bounced around a couple different places, but I ended up in the law enforcement academy. When I was single and had a chocolate lab living on Pine Island, I went through the law enforcement academy. And my target was to end up in FWC. Right. Because I've been playing in the woods and on the water all these years, and I found all sorts of different ways to break the law, so why not find a way to
fish and wildlife for those that don't know.
So assign me a boat, a four-wheeler, and pay me a nominal sum, and I'll do it. I mean, for me, it's never really been money-driven. It's been fun.
Yeah.
So I went through the LE Academy, and I graduated from there, and I started the application process with the state. And at the same time, I was working nights for a private armed security company to build up my resume for LE. And because I was working nights, but I had open days, I wanted to fill up my days. And I found a Craigslist ad for a bellman on Useppa.
Really?
And
so tell everybody where Useppa is, since we haven't actually said where the relation to
Useppa is a 100-acre private island that's about a 10-15 minute boat ride west from Pine Island. It's situated just east of Cabbage Key. If you've ever been on Cabbage Key at the restaurant and looked across the channel at the big white houses on the island across the way, that's Useppa.
Right.
So
we'll flash up a map here so that people can see.
Right.
So
the bellman. That's
right.
great.
So it's a private island club that caters both to residents of the island as well as a collection of non-resident members, kind of like a country club, but thankfully without the golf. And so there is a need for a bellman, somebody to schlep bags. And I was living on Pine Island at the time, and when you need to get an hourly paying job and you live on Pine Island, but you don't want to dig holes or, work in the kitchen of a restaurant, you kind of got to think outside the box. So I wasn't above carrying bags for wealthy people. It's like, so be it.
Yeah.
So I started there. And Useppa is one of those places that time has kind of stood still. So a lot of the old tried and true practices of moving up in the world still remain, where if you have a decent head on your shoulders and you keep showing up, you got a good opportunity to move up the ladder. So I did. And after a couple years, I was selling memberships for the existing membership director who had been there for 25, 26 years or so. He started as a busboy.
Really?
Wow. And so he started training me on selling memberships, and I said, okay. And he alluded to his retirement, so he suggested I get online and start the real estate classes, so I did. And then next thing I knew, a couple months later, he said, I'm retiring. You better get your real estate license. So I continued to work on that, and I was lucky enough to have been given that position as membership director and real estate sales agent. So I started selling Useppa Island real estate.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Wow. And how many houses on the island, just to give people an idea of?
The island has 134 private parcels that make up the original PUD. So right now there's
what's a PUD?
Planned unit development.
Okay.
So the community was, or at least the island, created 134 private parcels that are owned fee simple. And over the course of the 80s and 90s, some of the early 2000s homes were built, and they range from simple 2-bedroom, 2-bath duplexes that are about 1,400 square feet to opulent single-family homes that are 5 to, the largest house out there I believe is right around 9,000 square feet, but the average is probably 3,000.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then how many full-time residents?
Just a small handful. Most people are seasonal or periodic use.
And then how many staff coming out every day?
Our staffing right now is in the 70s. For years and years and years, we maintained staff numbers between 50 and 60. But when 2020 reared its head, we experienced a lot of demand, and we've had to grow along with the demand and urgency for access. So like so many people in the early stages of 2020, we were kind of sitting around looking around at one another. Just
what's going to happen?
What's going to happen? And before we knew it, it happened. And it came in the form of just a flood of demand, flood of people just trying to find access.
And there's actually some employee housing on the island?
There is, yes. Some of our staff do live on island. They're typically restaurant staff because of the hours. And many of our restaurant employees are seasonal restaurant employees who follow the seasons and go to various clubs around the country. So it's a small group. I mean, we're a very tight-knit group of employees, and keeping up with everything is tough. Running a restaurant on the mainland is one thing. Running a restaurant on a small island in the middle of Pine Island Sound is another.
When you run out of
and there's a lot of moving parts. I mean, we have landscaping department, housekeeping department, golf cart mechanic. We make our own water, so we have our own utility plant. There's no septic, so we have a sewage treatment plant. And we have all the problems that you could ever imagine. And oh, by the way, everything has to come on island via boat.
Right.
And just to clarify, there's no vehicles on the island, only a couple of construction trucks, but
Golf carts.
golf carts
Right.
only.
Everybody gets around by a golf cart.
Right.
Yeah.
We're not connected by roads. All electric golf carts. We've got a fire department, which is staffed 24/7. So if there's an emergency, you dial 911 and the firefighters come. It's
Is that really? Are they must be? Are they double as something else on the island?
well, in most cases, we have a group of, you could call them volunteers, but they're off-island firefighters who come out and provide coverage while we also have a full-time chief and assistant chief. So,
And they live on the island?
they do, yes.
Really? Wow.
So you have an interesting commute to work, which everybody would love to have.
Yeah, I live in Fort Myers, so I got to get myself to Bokeelia on Pine Island, and then I jump on a boat, and it's about a 10-15 minute boat ride to work every day.
Yeah.
So
Fantastic.
Do you drive? You drive to Bokeelia?
yeah, I drive to Bokeelia, and then I'll either run my boat because I have that option to be able to run my boat, or I can jump on one of our ferry boats. So just depending on what the weather is and how badly I want to run my boat, just kind of depends on how I get there.
And we go out. Max and I have been out recently, and we're fortunate enough to live on the water, so we always go out by boat. And what a fantastic ride it is out there! I definitely recommend it. And going on to that a little bit, if you're a member of the public, there are several ways to get onto the island, but how would you recommend? What's the best way? There's a couple of charters that come out, isn't there? Or?
There is a long-standing relationship that we've had with Captiva Cruises out of McCarthy's Marina, and they do a good job running folks out to the island and into the restaurant. There's a select number of Captiva passengers that can eat lunch in our restaurant, and they can also go through the museum. The museum on Useppa is fascinating because the history of the island goes back as far as you can see.
Yeah, speak to that as starting with the Colusas.
You can follow it back, and I don't really know where to start other than there's a presence of archaeological middens on island, commonly known as Colusa Indian mounds, or they're at least attributed to the Colusa Indians because they're the last archaic civilization to have been really credited for use of those Indian mounds. But
and it's basically shells that they
it's correct.
stacked up
It's a
into these
collection
mounds.
of shells, which they use the shells for both food source as well as tools. And over thousands of years, you collect enough shells and you have some pretty significant piles, but the mounds also doubled, of course, as elevation for disasters. And I believe there was also some religious significance and, get you closer to the gods the higher you are. So, and oh, by the way, you also have some protection from hurricanes. So those Indian mounds are on Useppa, and it's actually the reason why Useppa has the highest point in elevation in all of Lee County.
Right.
Really?
That's true.
Correct.
That is an
I
interesting
thought that
fact.
was not a trivia question.
Yeah, I'll be giving you a quiz on Useppa
Yeah.
at the end of this. But so these Indian mounds create elevation on our little island, which has allowed certain pieces of property, not all pieces of property, to be out of the floodway. And even if there was a mortgage, they wouldn't need flood insurance on our little 100-acre island.
That's very impressive.
Which is pretty mind-blowing. But there's been a series of archaeological digs on the island there in the late 80s and into the early 90s, where findings of human remains were carbon dated back 10,000 years.
Right.
Wow.
Now, that's the turn of the last ice age. And that is actually before Useppa was an island. The Gulf coastline at that time was some 30 miles, I want to say, to our west.
That's
so
right.
Useppa was part of mainland Florida at that time. And there were inhabitants of that area for whatever reason. And the history just evolved from there to the Colusas, to the Cubans. Before the federal government, the United States federal government recognized the value in Florida, especially Gulf Coast Florida. Florida was essentially the the last frontier. It was Indian country. They ran all the Indians south into Florida, and the areas south of Lake Okeechobee were uncharted territories.
The Seminoles, yeah.
Right, and it really wasn't. I mean, going back to I think it was like the mid 19th century. The railways didn't even go any further south than Punta Gorda.
Right.
So Florida was in the Fed's mind unusable land, and that's when the whole drain the swamp, drain Florida efforts began, where they started carving canals into every possible place.
So unregulated. It's crazy to think about what they did.
Oh yeah, I mean they just started digging and draining off the land to try to create a developable area.
Right.
And the Cubans, before the feds actually started seeing the value in Florida, would come up from Cuba and they would fish the Gulf Coast of Florida. And they're called now Cuban rancheros, but they would create these fish houses in these areas where they would go and stay and fish during certain seasons. And at some point in history, there was a Cuban ranchero, and I forget his name, who controlled Useppa Island. And then after that, and of course my timelines are probably off, but at some point in history, Baron Collier, the namesake for Collier County, bought Useppa, which makes sense because Collier made an effort to buy any coastal, Southwest Florida coastal area with high elevation, and Useppa with the highest point of elevation in all Lee County. It was only fitting.
And then he bought that as a private.
That was his
island.
That was his winter residence. Yep. So what we use now as our restaurant, the Collier Inn, was his house. And he was really the spearhead for the development of Southwest Florida. And by owning Useppa, he would call down his business friends and high rollers from the Northeast, and they would ride the rails down to Punta Gorda, and then they would get on a boat in the Peace River, and the Peace River dumps out into Charlotte Harbor, and Useppa is located just on the southern rim of Charlotte Harbor. So that was the entry into Southwest Florida, and that avoided people from having to get on a horse and carriage and trudge through the swamp to get down to Fort Myers, which is where Edison and Ford were stationed. So Collier essentially, at least in my mind, the way I see it, he utilized Useppa as his sales office for the development of Southwest Florida.
That's true.
And along the way, of course, he bought and destroyed Marco Island. Marco Island was at one point really one of the most significant archaeological sites in all of the Gulf Coast, and it was razed to the ground, and of course condos were grown there. So Marco Island is really a black eye when it comes to the history of Florida. And look at it today. It's paradise.
Right. Certain amount of sarcasm there.
So, and then Collier's house now. So the restaurant's downstairs, and then upstairs there's hotel rooms. Is that what's
correct? There's 7 single rooms in the Collier Inn, which are rented out to club members. But we also have a scattering of other single rooms around the island, and all property owners are allowed, if they want, to enter their units into the club's rental program, which is made available to Useppa Island club members. So can come and rent an accommodation from a simple single room to a large single family home.
But that's just only open to members, correct?
That's correct. Members and members' guests. Right.
So you can be a member on the island without being an owner. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's really the basis of our membership roster. Non-Useppa resident members who maintain membership simply to have access to the island.
So you can come out and then
use the restaurant,
the
swimming pool.
Exactly.
Yeah, they can use you have is it croquet? No, bocce. No.
Well, we have both.
Okay.
We started with croquet. Croquet was for years, Useppa was one of the premier croquet destinations, and not everybody knows it, but there is a whole croquet community out there with an international ranking system and all the rest.
You have to wear croquet whites to play.
You absolutely do. And they took it very, very seriously for many, many years. And there were international croquet tournaments on Useppa and all the rest. These days, it's more casual. Most of the croquet being played is much more casual. Many of our new residents are younger, and they tend to play croquet after dark. They pull their golf carts up around the lawn, turn on their lights, and turn on music and drink heavily, and that's croquet.
Sounds like fun.
But we installed some bocce ball courts as well.
Right.
And there's limited space, of course, and we can't really inundate it with every activity out there.
We have tennis too.
We also have tennis, yeah.
And a tennis pro.
Yeah, there is a tennis pro that'll come out there during seasons. So we try to cover as many realms as we reasonably can.
And at one point there was actually a couple of golf holes on the island, wasn't there?
Right. I want to say it was in the mid 20s into the 30s. There was, I think it was like a 9-hole golf course out there. And back then, I mean, between the golf and all the shooting people did, if it wasn't upright on 2 legs, it had a bullseye on it back then. Right. So a lot of sportsmen and women would come down to Useppa to target tarpon.
Right.
And the
home of the was it sports fishing? Yeah.
Sports fishing was created. That's Tarpon Bay is named after the tarpon down here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the first tarpon on hook and line was caught at some point in the 19th century. I forget the year. And that fish, or maybe one other soon after, was displayed, I think, at the World's Fair in Chicago, and that just lighted up this obsession in catching tarpon. So tarpon fishing was the first draw of tourism to Southwest Florida before beaches and sunbathing were really anything.
Right.
So that's what brought people down to this area, was to target tarpon. And that's what Useppa became known for, because, of course, we're only 4 miles south of Boca Grande Pass, the premier tarpon fishing destination in the world, or so it's been known as. The fishing guides would come over from Boca Grande to pick up the folks staying on Useppa, and then they would go out and catch tarpon. And there's still old skin mounts of
scales.
Talk about the scales. That was kind of like your trophy, wasn't it?
Right. The tradition was when you caught a tarpon back then, they would collect a scale, and of course, they killed everything. To take a picture with the fish required the fish being out of the water forever. So just about everything died, but they would collect these scales as talismans of their catch, and they would write on the scale the fisherman or woman's name, the weight, and the date that it was caught. And those scales were pinned up to the walls of what was then the Isaac Walton Club bar that was within the hotel that once existed on the north end of our island, called the Tarpon Inn.
Right.
And the Tarpon Inn was eventually destroyed in 1935 by that massive 35 hurricane that skirted the west coast of Florida. It's still known today, I think, as the strongest hurricane of record. But that bar was completely lined with these tarpon scales. So in 1976, when the current owners, Garfield and Sinai Beckstead, took ownership of the island, they bought a 100-acre overgrown island in the middle of Pine Island Sound with 5 or 6 buildings that were constructed between the years, late 1800s to early 1900s.
When they bought it, it was in a bad state of disrepair.
Exactly.
Do you know what attracted them to the island? They saw a vision, I'm guessing.
It was really the island itself, and I could probably get really distracted and go down a whole other rabbit hole here.
This is also fascinating.
But Gar was involved with the Mariner Group, which was a development group involved with Sanibel, Captiva, among many other things, South Seas. And they were the Mariner Group at one time owned Useppa. And that's how Garfield became aware of what Useppa was. And that began his obsession. That it became his life's obsession to develop and turn Useppa into what he saw in his mind's eye, which was essentially an island paradise. They truly fell head over heels in love with the history, the ambiance, and the environment of it. And their ultimate goal was to preserve it while also being able to share it with others. So the development of the island was done in an effort to preserve the history, to preserve the environment, to not overbuild. Yeah. And there are protections in place in the restrictive covenants that would hopefully prohibit some other entity out there in targeting Useppa. And, we don't want people to think that they can come over there and just reinvent the wheel. They can't. So the island and its integrity has been preserved thanks to the Becksteads. But the tarpon scales remained on island over all the years of history. And when Garfield and Sinai took ownership, they started assessing all these rundown buildings that they owned and started exploring through it. And they found an old clawfoot bathtub in one of the rooms, and that bathtub was filled to the brim with these old tarpon scales with names and dates on them. And they preserved them. There's hundreds of these mahogany wood.
Right, they're mounted on these wood plaques.
They turned them into plaques and epoxied over them, and they're all over the island, which is just fun. I mean, you go around and you say, oh my gosh, this 170-pound tarpon was caught in 1924 by
this woman or whatever.
E.W. Griswold or some such name. And my brother and I have in the past at least looked at some of the names, and we've researched some of these characters. And these were high rollers. These were heavy hitters back in the day. So Useppa attracted some really, really big money early on, which spurned the development of Southwest Florida.
And it was a lot of people that wanted to be low-key, incognito, politicians, people like that, people that didn't want to be in the limelight.
Yeah, over the years, we attract an eclectic bunch. There's no doubt about that. We attract folks who, in most cases, have no desire to really draw a lot in attention. They're not, hey, look at me type of people. They don't come out there so they can talk about how important they are in the real world. And it is a low-key kind of place where, most of us just don't care what you do on the mainland. And I mean, if you're out there, you're there for a reason. And in most cases, you learn more about people after getting to know them for a while if you just do your own research. There's a lot of interesting folks who end up out there.
And the hotel, if you haven't seen the hotel, which I think the tour, if you go from McCarthy's Marina, will take you to the hotel and the restaurant. It's a really historical place and incredible bit of history, still part of the island that's there today. One of the best parts.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun to be involved with, and I'm a history buff too, and I love Florida history. And there's actually some recent books that came out where Useppa's a pretty big part in it. The Gulf is a comprehensive look at the Gulf coastal regions of North America, and also a book named The Swamp. Author's last name is Grumwald, and The Swamp is really a good look at what has transpired in Florida over the course of history. And of course, a big topic in our state is water, our clean water issues. And there's a reason why we have water issues. And it started back in the mid 19th century when people started looking at Florida as, a real gem. And when the efforts to develop Florida south of the lake started, they started digging canals. And I'm sorry, but that was the start of our water issues. It's been blamed on Big Ag because they're the most most obvious, I guess, benefactor or person or entity that has benefited from the region south of the lake. And
they're still in existence today, I guess.
And they're making money, but you know what? I think Big Mouse, Disney, has just as much to blame, because they're right up there in the Kissimmee Delta and water flows south. But the existing communities that wouldn't have existed if not for dredging. Cape Coral is just one example.
Cape Coral is a whole story on its own. Yeah.
We have manipulated the environment and the landscape over the course of 150 years to allow ourselves to live in these gated communities with these manicured lawns that are overwatered, over-fertilized year round, to sit back behind your computer and blame Big Ag.
Yeah.
So it's a collective problem.
Right.
There's no one entity that is to blame.
And thank goodness it's coming to light now with all like Captains for Clean Water and all these wonderful organizations.
Exactly. I mean, because if there's nobody asking questions, if there's no pressure being put on the powers that be, there's not going to be anything. And I've noticed personally, and I spent a lot of time on the water out there, ever since the water issues have become a political topic of conversation, things have changed.
Yeah.
Now they're not vocalizing it or making it known to everybody, but for whatever reason, over the last couple of years, our water clarity has been better.
Yeah,
and a lot of it is to do with the colonel that's in charge of the
Army Corps
of Engineers.
Well, he just retired,
and they've just handed over to another guy that's just taken over in the last couple of months. And I think they've done a good job of changing it. There's definitely a change, and I think we can even see it in our backyard. You can look into the river water, and it's definitely been clearer over the last couple of years than it was before.
So something's changed, and there have been drastic changes over the decades that I've grown up fishing Pine Island Sound. I mean, the depletion of the turtle grass beds is the most obvious to me. I mean, when turtle grass starts going away, there's a reason. The depletion of healthy oyster beds is another sure sign. I mean, the mouth of the Colusa River, even when I was growing up, was littered with living oyster beds, where now they're just dead lumps, basically. And the Sanibel Captiva, or the Sanibel Causeway spoil islands, certainly redirected flow and just change things. You know, there's a domino effect of every manipulation of the landscape and the environment, and it takes a while for that to catch up. So we're, I think, experiencing the results of over 150 years of just full court press development. And it's starting to catch up, and we're smart to get on top of it, or to try to reel it back in, to try to salvage it. Now, hopefully the solutions solve more problems than they create, and that's going to be a constant battle.
Just make sure you check out the Captains for Clean Water, and there's lots of other organisations out there. If you want to get involved, it's a great cause and something we're passionate about. So definitely look into it if it's something you're interested in.
Yeah.
I have a question. Is all the buildings being white, is that an ordinance, or is that an unspoken rule on Useppa?
That's an element of our restrictive covenants. So there are architectural guidelines as well as an architectural review board to oversee what is done with the buildings out there. And one of the architectural restrictions is that buildings must be a shade of white in color. There is one house out there that is yellow. And that house is actually right near, we have a very large, very old banyan tree on our beach. It's very picturesque.
It's so cool.
And that house is located right next to that banyan tree. It's called, aptly named, Banyan. That house was painted yellow in 1976. The deed restrictions or restrictive covenants were put into effect in 1978. So that house was grandfathered. It's
Was that in reaction to a yellow house being put there?
I don't know.
Really?
I guess another alternative to a shade of white would be natural wood siding. We have 2 houses out there that have, I think it's cedar siding, so they're brown. But the yellow house is still yellow. It was bought. It's one of 5 of the original guest houses on the island that Baron Collier created. The first year on the tax rolls, 1912. So this is a historic home, and it was bought by a family from St. Louis in the 70s. Not long at they were one of our first owners on island, and the family still owns it today.
They're still hanging in with the yellow.
Are they allowed to repaint the same shade, or if they go to repaint, like they must have repainted it in the last 50 years, right?
Oh yeah.
So they're allowed to stick with the yellow shade.
Yep.
But they couldn't go with a different shade.
I don't think so. No.
Right.
Boy, that would stir the pot.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh.
So
Another thing I love, talk about the pink path that you have.
The pink path, the pink promenade pathway, has been out there really since Collier's years. I don't know when exactly it was installed, but it's the main thoroughfare or walkway from the north end of the island, and it goes direct to the Collier end. And in more modern history, it was continued all the way to the south end of the island. But this pink colored concrete,
It's like a sidewalk, I guess.
right? And I could probably make some stuff up, but I believe it was created with coquina shells, and there was a pink hue to the coquina shells when it was made, so it has this pink color.
Yeah.
And the historic pathway is still there. I mean, it's cracked. There's all sorts of trip hazards, and it's a common topic of discussion in annual town hall meetings. But it's a part of history, and
charm.
Our goal is to preserve history. So we don't want to rip up the 100-year-old pink path and lay down a new modern pink path. Although the attorneys would probably appreciate that.
Right. And you can't have the golf carts on there, correct? So you can just, is that right?
Well, yeah, there's portions of the pink path where golf carts are not allowed, but the more modern southern pink path is a golf cart road, I guess, if you will.
Right.
So,
and then somebody has done like vegetation markers too, which I love. You can walk the path and see, identify the
it's like a self-guided botanical tour where there's signs. It really helps me when I'm on real estate tours and people ask what kind of tree is that, and I just glance down at the sign and act like I know what I'm talking about, or I just make something up.
Right.
So you got the museum, you've got all the botanical walk, the historical walk. You've got one thing that we didn't talk about is there's an avid sailing racing community there that does a weekly race around the island during season. What sort of boats are they there?
This is about the extent of my knowledge of these sailboats. They are Marshall cat boats.
Okay, Marshall cat. They're not catamarans. They're just like monohull, maybe 20, 22 feet long.
It took me a couple
of
years.
Very seriously.
Yeah, they love to sail. There's no doubt about it. And much of our population come from the New England, and that's a big sailing community. And of course they brought it down to Useppa, and over the years, every winter season, the property owners pull their cat boats out of storage, and they put them on anchor buoys along the eastern shoreline, and they have regattas every Saturday.
So they just race around the island. Is that what they do?
They set up buoys out into Pine Island Sound, and they race each other, and then they get drunk afterwards on the beach.
And it's incredible. These are all exactly the same boats, and we were lucky enough to go on one of the races, and it's incredible how far ahead some of these people get away from the pack. I mean, they're quality, so I don't know how they do it. It's all the same boats, and
there are some folks out there who come from a lineage of competitive sailors, and I guess the sailing competitiveness in New England is pretty intense. So these are known families where
they take it
it's outside
serious.
it's outside of my realm. I never. The only sailing I ever did over the years was when one of my buddies, my best friend growing up, Kyle, he's the one who got me into marine construction, and we liked finding fun things to do on the water. And most people would think, well, sailing, it doesn't really strike me as something a couple 22-year-old guys who push 100-foot long barges with tugboats and do all sorts of stuff would really find fun. But when you have a 25-foot junky sailboat and you wait specifically until the worst summer squalls spool up to go out, sailing is fun. I mean, sailing is fun when you do it that way.
Yeah.
And so that's my sailing experience. Most of the time, I like to have some sort of combustion engine underneath me or behind me.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah.
Much easier that way, isn't it?
It's so fascinating.
We're going to have some content coming up. We've got so much stock footage of the islands that Max and I should definitely go out there and make a film about the islands. So make sure you like and subscribe, and then we'll be releasing something.
It is tropical paradise. The palm trees with the white houses and the pink path. And
you would have you absolutely should come out there and do a comprehensive overview of Useppa, where you could talk to property owners, you could talk to a variety of people out there, and you would have some great content. I mean,
we should do it.
My broker, my boss, and I oftentimes are just sitting out there.
You need to write a book.
We do. Yes. It would be.
You could do the last couple of words.
Right. You could do the last sentence of the book.
But we probably say to one another at least once or twice a week, you just can't make this stuff up.
Right.
No, I bet.
I mean,
because
we navigate our way through one totally unique situation just to be blindsided by the next.
Yeah.
And what happened 2 weeks ago is already forgotten.
Right.
Yeah.
It's
incredible place.
But one interesting fact, it was a training ground for the Bay of Pigs.
That's correct.
What I've heard?
So at some point in the 60s, the CIA or the feds got some semblance of control. Maybe they owned it. I forget. But they used Useppa as the environment by which they would train the Bay of Pigs invaders, the troops who went into Cuba. And my recollection of the actual history is a little dim. But they housed these individuals on Useppa as though it was a mock invasion because the environment was about right. And I don't know exactly what it is they did. Mm-hmm. It didn't turn out well.
We'll leave it at that.
Right.
But they were there.
They were there for sure. Yeah, inckredible history.
Oh my gosh,
it goes on and on and on.
Yeah,
and we definitely need to make a video about the place, and so look out for it on the channel. Max, I understand you've got a couple of questions.
How did you know? How did you know?
You ready for trivia?
All right. Well,
every day I get trivia.
You guys managed to answer some of my trivia questions already.
Oh, good.
So
as long as
I had to edit. I edited one of them on the fly. But my first question was, after Baron Collier.
Rogan, you got to write it down because Laurie's been known to cheat. So
you're not going to need to write this one down.
Okay.
After Baron Collier abandoned the island, it was used as a military base in this swine-based invasion in what country?
Okay, we got it.
Bay of Pigs, Cuba. All right. Well, thanks for giving the answer away, Mom. Mom, we made it 53 minutes without you giving away an answer, and you ruined it at the last second.
Sorry.
All right, and then this one I had to edit too because we talked about Baron Collier already. But the island of Useppa was first developed by a Mr. John M. Roach before he sold it to a locally famous land tycoon, Baron Collier. In what year did he acquire the island?
This is Roach?
Mr. Roach. He was a Chicago streetcar magnate.
Mm-hmm. Right. He did advertising on streetcars or something.
Yeah.
Like that. Or
maybe
in what year did he acquire it?
Okay. I got it.
You do not.
I know his brother.
You know his brother.
Yeah, we went to school together. Rogan, you got any idea?
I've got an idea.
All right. Has everyone got an answer?
I've got an idea.
All right. I don't have any idea. All right, go on, Nick.
Rogan, you go first. What you got?
I have 1853.
1853?
I put 1895.
I put 1902.
1894 is the answer.
Woo! That would be me.
You're the new membership director.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
So he was the one.
Send all my emails to me.
Thank you.
So he was the one who built the hotel, I guess. because his
okay.
friends convinced him. I'm just reading from the website right now, but his friends convinced him to build a hotel so they could come join him on his island.
That sounds about right. I mean, I got some friends like that too.
They want you to build a hotel.
Yeah, just give me something to do. Be your responsibility. You pay for it, but it'll be fun for us.
And
I love it.
And then after that, Baron Collier acquired it and then did
Built his
everything that we
house.
talked about earlier.
Yeah, that seems fair. I mean, if it's online, it's true.
Yeah.
Yes.
I
Yes.
agree.
It is on the UseppaIslandClub.com.
There we go.
Yeah, I probably wrote that. And I forgot it says.
That's funny.
All
Okay.
right.
All right,
number
last
3.
question.
Okay.
Useppa Island is historically had some damn big names visiting in its heyday. One being this president.
Was the dam? Is that?
Emphasis on the dam.
Oh, okay. I think I've got it.
I mean, I think there's more than one answer to this,
Yeah.
but
There's definitely probably more than one
Yeah.
presidential visitor, but this one is a damn big name.
Okay. I got it.
Has Rogan written anything? Or
it's
he's
written in my head. Roosevelt.
Nope. Mom?
I put Hoover.
Oh,
The Hoover Dam.
What?
Herbert
I can
Hoover.
really cheat now, but I'm not like Laurie, so
Right.
I actually put Roosevelt.
Yeah, I'm
Well-
sure. There was probably many
I'm
presidential
sure
visitors in the
Roosevelt probably
heyday.
did too.
Yeah, there's been some visitors out there. Carter was out there not too long ago.
Really?
Yeah, well, I'm talking 15, 20 years ago, but
Right.
he made an appearance out there. The Bush family, they're known to play around on Boca Grande. They may have showed up out there at some
Right.
point. We don't really attract many huge names.
Really?
The celebrity, people often ask me, what celebrities come out here? It's like, well, I guess all of our visitors are famous in their own minds in one way or another, but the hey, look at me type people don't generally come out there.
Yeah.
We do attract some newsies, some news anchors over the years have been members, and a lot of times the big name visitors come by way of Boca Grande. Boca Grande is just exploded. It seems like there's no price people won't pay to be on Boca Grande, and over the recent years.
It's about 4 miles north of.
Yep, 4 miles north, and over recent years, the billionaires have been pushing the millionaires off of Boca Grande. So the whole landscape has been really, really changing.
Really?
There's a lot of very interesting characters running around right now.
Wow.
Well, I hate to admit it, but I guess Mom won by default. But that's the extent of my questions.
Okay, that's excellent.
Good.
All right,
I got none right.
I tried to write them in your favor, Rogan.
Try a little bit harder.
Well,
All right,
thank
Dad,
you
close
so
us
much
off.
for joining us. Much appreciated, and we should do it
Yeah,
again
that's great.
sometime for sure.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
And once again, make sure you mention in the comments below or drop us an email. What's the email, Max? The sandcapguide@gmail.com. If you've got any ideas for people that want to come on the podcast, we'd love to hear from you. Any questions you've got, we'd love to answer them for you. So, please like and subscribe. Make sure you come back and check it out.
Yeah. And if you're interested in a house,
Yes, how can
Hit
they
up
get
Rogan.
hold
How
of
can-
Yeah, I'll sell you a house.
you can get your membership through Rogan?
Yeah, the memberships right now is worth touching on. We ended up capping our membership last May. We reached our total cap, so right now we're accepting applications that go on a waiting list.
Okay.
And then we activate accounts as we have existing accounts canceled. So this is actually a major step in the history of Useppa. It's the first time in our modern history where we've reached our cap to the point that membership is closed.
Wow.
It was a goal of mine when I started in 2016. I didn't think it would really happen, but I also didn't expect a pandemic.
right.
And apparently, private islands off the coast of Florida do well
In a pandemic.
Pandemics. Well, yeah.
So you can apply. You can find the application on our website, useppa.com, and that's where you can also find real estate listings. And I'd be happy to sell you something.
Yeah.
Awesome.
it
Okay,
out.
thanks very much, Rogan.
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Thanks.
All right, thanks very much to our sponsors, Captains for Clean Water, Bailey's General Store, Doc Ford's Rum Bar and Grill, Spoondrift Island Bowls, 3 Crafty Ladies, GatorBites Tail and Ale, Priscilla's of Sanibel Coco y Cabana, Suncatchers Dream, and
Coco y
Sanibel-
Cabana.
Coco
That's
y
what I
Cabana?
said. Sorry, Coco y
No,
Cabana,
he did not.
Suncatchers Dream, and Sanibel Carts. Thanks very much. Thanks for joining us, and look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thank you.